One of the main types of fractional executives out there is fractional sales leaders. Oftentimes they're called fractional VPs of sales. If you want to run a good sales department, if you want to, and if you're a brokerage, if you're if you're a salesperson in whatever industry, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? And you may be good at sales as an individual, but scaling a large sales organization within a business is it's a whole area of expertise. Obviously, as you know, there's people who are experts in this, and if you bring in as your head of sales, you don't have to be able to afford that person full time. You can bring in a very experienced sales leader to set up your sales department, set up your metrics, set up your training, set up your processes, manage your team, get things set up, maybe get someone long-term, set up and elevated as a longer-term leader. And you could get that without having to reinvent the wheel yourself, without having to figure it all out.
Hey, what's up, Masters? Welcome to another episode of Path to Mastery podcast. Today we're with Mr. Ben Wolf. What's going on, Ben?
It's all good, David. Nice to have me. I mean, thank you for having me on. It's probably
nice to have you. It is nice to have you on the show. Yes. Amen. Well, listen, I'm excited to learn more about fractional leadership, and you have your own podcast called the Win-Win Podcast, which I love. Win-Win. Wolf's Edge Integrators, and you speak to entrepreneurial business owners with teams of anywhere from 10 to 150 people. You're the founder and CEO of the largest fractional part-time COO firm, Wolf's Edge Integrators. Some call Ben the godfather of fractional leadership because as leaders of their clients' management teams, Ben and his team coach, manage, and hire leadership roles, both full-time and fractional. He wrote the best-selling book on the industry, Fractional Leadership, and landing executive talents you thought was out of reach. And is also, again, the host of the Win-Win Podcast. So again, Ben, thank you for being with us today.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I'm going to start here, just with what is first. We'll start right here, just at the basics. What is fractional leadership for our listeners? Explain it to us.
Yeah. Fractional leadership is having the leader of a major function of a business, whether that's something like marketing, sales, operations, people/HR, finance, technology, whatever it happens to be, the leader of a function of a business, but who fulfills that role on a fractional, meaning a part-time basis, as opposed to full-time. I mean, at simplest level, that's really all it is. The difference between that and, let's say, a consultant is a consultant comes in for a specific scope of work or maybe giving advice, but not taking over responsibility for the entire marketing function of the business or the entire sales function of the business or the entire finance or operations function of the business. But a fractional executive or fractional leader sits on the organizational chart of the business. They're responsible for that whole function of the business, and they just fulfill that role on a fractional as opposed to full-time basis.
So what are some of the reasons why a company or a corporation or would want somebody fractional as opposed to just hiring somebody full-time, maybe long-term, I guess, or can fractional also be long-term?
Well, it can be long-term. With our firm, we prefer it to be, somewhere 9 to 18 months and really ultimately look to pass the baton to somebody long-term, full-time. Whether we're elevating somebody from inside or bringing in someone as a new hire from outside. But to answer your real question, is why would you bring in somebody fractionally for some role instead of hiring somebody full-time? And it's usually because hiring somebody full-time of the type of person you need is not an option. That's why. If the type of, let's say you need a sales leader, someone that's built a large sales organization before, not someone that's just figuring it out for the first time. and you need someone with experience and someone with background in it who's done it before. And you may be a size of an organization that can't afford the $250 or $300,000 plus bonus and benefits that it would cost to hire an executive of that caliber full time. And maybe an additional point is that for some organizations, it may not even be a full-time role. So it would be a waste even to hire somebody and pay that kind of money for somebody for what really ultimately would not even take a full-time amount of time. So what hiring fractional enables you to do is to get to somebody a much higher caliber than you would be able to afford on a full-time basis, but still have them leading, still have them leading your team or your managers. And that's really the main thing, is you can just get a much higher caliber person. If that higher caliber person is what you need, then you can actually get that on a fractional basis when you may not be able to on a full-time basis.
So it seems, if I'm reading it right, it's probably more for like projects and like specific, almost like a consultant, right? If a company needs to focus on a specific outcome, they're going to bring somebody in that's an expert in this space, temporary, like per diem. And is that accurate, or am I missing
Well, I
something?
would say it a little bit differently. I think that the difference is that when it comes to what consultants to typically do, is they're either brought in because they have a great expertise in some topic, and so they're doing some discovery and finding things out, then making recommendations that then the organization and their internal people are responsible for executing. Or some consultants also do execution, but they'll have a specific scope of work of whatever projects or work that they're supposed to execute. Fractional executives or fractional leaders, in contrast, are not there for projects specifically. They're there because they're actually filling a role on the organizational chart. They're not a consultant. They're not an outsider. In a certain way, they're an insider. They're actually have the role on the organizational chart. Your sales manager in your real estate company, let's say, that's not a consultant, right? Your sales manager, whether they're fulfilling that role on a part-time or full-time basis, is the head of sales. The head of
Mm,
marketing, the CMO, is your CMO. They're responsible for the entire marketing function of the business, the metrics, the execution, managing the team. That's what the fractional executive, that's what a fractional CMO, for example, is doing. They're managing the marketing team, the social media team, the graphic design team, the copywriting team, the video production team, or whatever the PPO, pay per click team, whatever, or the outside vendors that are executing those things. They're overseeing all of those people responsible for the numbers and the results of that entire department, not just any one specific project. And you mentioned per diem in terms of how are fractional executives compensated. Typically, most of them are compensated using some sort of retainer. So there'll be some sort of monthly retainer. There's a minority maybe that bill based on the hour or just by the day, just bill for whatever's used. But most of them, because they are fulfilling a role in the business, they don't want you to be like your lawyer, like you make a phone call and you get a bill, right? They don't want you to feel like that, right? They're your head of
mm.
sales, head of marketing, they're your head of operations, whatever the role happens to be. So it's just based on a retainer, and you actually fulfill the role during that time. And they don't want you thinking about the bill every time you make a phone call, because you're actually fulfilling that role.
Got it. And you said the average stays 9 to 18, typically 9 to 18 months is
Yeah,
what
that's definitely what it is with us. I would say most fractional executive solo practitioners or firms like ours are typically looking at doing that on a non-permanent basis, whether that's 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, and then ultimately looking to bring in a long-term full-time solution. But there are some out there, some businesses that aren't really looking to grow in a way that would ever require that role to ever be full time, especially on the CFO roles. I know a lot of businesses that have CFOs that they just have for years. They use their CFOs fractional because they get a great experienced CFO. They've got them half a day a week, a day a week, whatever it happens to be, the appropriate amount for them, what they need to supervise their controller, their finance team, and give the right strategic advice and analysis and guidance to the business owner and the rest of the leadership team. And they could do that, 4 to 8 hours a week or whatever it happens to be, for years, and they're not going to, many businesses aren't going to hit a point over the course of many years when they would ever need a full-time CFO. And so they could use that solution for a long time. But I would say that's more the exception than the rule.
So how is this different than Ben and going out and, like, let's say you go to Upwork as an example and hire somebody? Is there a difference between, are you
Technically,
familiar with Upwork? I
yeah,
mean,
sure.
I'm guessing,
I've used it many
okay,
times.
okay. Or, or,
And
or
there
even,
are
yeah.
people. If you look on Upwork, you will find fractional executives on there,
Mm,
and so Upwork is, there's technically no reason why you can't find a fractional executive on Upwork, and there are ones that are on there. So it definitely can potentially do that. Upwork is just a way of finding people, a way of having recommendations or reviews of people, know how many hours they've done on the platform before, right? So you have a certain confidence in what they could do. Those are the pros of it, obviously. I would say most experienced executives who are serving clients fractionally are not on Upwork. It's something that people associate more with, like a Fiverr, with, like, sort of a lower level tasks and projects,
mm.
rather than having an executive on your leadership team be on Upwork. It's not that typical. It does exist, and you can find people doing that. There's no reason technically why I couldn't, but most reputable ones just happen to not be on that platform.
Got it. And what would you say is, for people listening, like, we have a lot of salespeople that tune in to our podcast in multiple industries. So what would be your message to them when it comes to, and some have larger teams and some are just independent, salespeople. So what would you say to those people when it comes to this type of leadership?
Well, I guess I would speak on two perspectives. One, speaking more from the organization's perspective about this, the sales team, let's say for those sales managers or those people who are responsible for a sales team. And then on the other side of the coin, speak to the perspective of someone who might be thinking of going into being a fractional sales leader. So maybe I could speak to both of those perspectives that might be useful for people in your audience. One, from the perspective of the organization, if you have an organization, if you have a real estate brokerage, if you're a sales manager or you're an owner of a business, one of the main types of fractional executives out there is fractional sales leaders. Oftentimes they're called fractional VPs of sales. So these are people, if you want to run a good sales department, if you want to, and if you're a brokerage, if you're if you're a salesperson in whatever industry, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? And you may be good at sales as an individual, but scaling a large sales organization within a business is it's a whole area of expertise. Obviously, as there's people who are experts in this, and if you bring in, as your head of sales, you don't have to be able to afford that person full time. You can bring in a very experienced sales leader to set up your sales department, set up your metrics, set up your training, set up your processes, manage your team, get things set up, maybe get someone long-term, set up and elevated as a longer term leader. And you could get that without having to reinvent the wheel yourself, without having to figure it all out. You can, bring in a fractional VP of sales. There's one organization called Sales Acceleration that you could look up, which is a great firm that has, maybe 180 fractional sales leaders, fractional VPs of sales all around the country. I'm sure many of which have real estate experience or have experience in the industries that you might be in. Those are great people to bring in. There's Pivotal Advisors. There's another firm out on the west side of the country, the United States, and a lot of great solo practitioners out there. So that is something to think about. Is bringing in a fractional VP of sales. That's one thing. If, however, you're more on the individual side, maybe you are a sales leader. Maybe you do have a number of salespeople under you, and you're thinking, hey, instead of being full-time 60, 70 hours a week in one organization, what if I was to go out on my own? What if I was to go independent or join a firm and, be a fractional sales leader for multiple organizations, and, do what I've done in my business, but do it at 3 businesses at a time, or whatever the number happens to be. And that is an option out there. Some people choose to go into this space because of 3 main benefits of fractional leadership from the fractional leader's perspective, which is, which I call more fun and more flexibility and more money. It's more fun in the sense that you don't get caught up as much in the annoying administrative lower level tasks because you're only fractional. You focus more on the higher level things. You'd be able to see a big impact that you get in businesses. And then when you finish the engagement, you move on to the next business. So you're always working on activities where you see a major impact and not just managing a team for 10 years. And so in that sense, it's more fun. It's more flexibility in the sense that you can make more money in about 3 days a week of client work than you can in a full-time executive role. And typically, so there's more money and there is more, I'm sorry, so that's more money, but there's also more flexibility because since you could do that in about 3 days a week of client work on, most of the time, you're able to have more flexibility for other things, for other passions in life, for other causes that are meaningful to you, for your family, for travel, or and for the business development and administrative stuff that's necessary for any solo practitioner or member of a firm. So there's just more flexibility in life. So that's why people like to go into it. Yeah, I guess I would say at a high level, I guess the only other thing I would say is if you're talking about salespeople, this won't be as hard for them as it is for some other kind of fractional executives. But any kind of independent person, getting clients, getting pipeline is the key. If you have to recognize if you do decide you want to branch out into something like that, you need to go into it with open eyes. Recognize that business development will always be sales will always be, and business development will always be part of the job description, and you have to be willing to go into it with open eyes and setting aside a lot of time for that. Or else it's not going to be successful. It doesn't happen automatically, typically.
Yeah. Well, we are on Clubhouse streaming, and we got about 30 people or so in a room. I don't know if you're on Clubhouse or not. I'm not on it as much anymore.
I tried it for a while. Is anyone asking anything on there?
Not yet, but I'll invite some other people up. May actually have some better questions than I do today. But I'm just let's talk about leaders in general. I like for a little, like what are some of the biggest challenges right now that leaders are facing in these times of just high interest rates, inflation, economy, literally just everything going on right now as of today's October 10th. We just had the craziness going on in Israel. I mean, what are the big challenges leaders are facing these days?
Well, the main thing I would say is not really, unique to today's current environment. But I would say that the biggest challenge that leaders have is fighting the urge to compromise. I mean, whatever the mission of your business is, or whatever it is that you're trying to, presumably if you're selling or you're selling something, you're providing a service that you think is actually going to help people. You actually believe in what you're doing, and you or your organization has some sort of mission that's bigger than yourself. And people are unfortunately I should say unfortunately, but people are too nice. And so if you've got a sales team under you, if you've got some other kind of team under you, if you're a leader of people, then you have a bigger mission that you're about. But sometimes if people are not the right people in your team, or they're not performing, or they're not hitting the numbers, or they're not doing what they're supposed to do, that's the right and best way to serve your customers or your clients, then sometimes a lot of us are just too nice of guys, too nice of gals. And we're not doing the hard things, making the hard choices, holding people to the numbers for which they're responsible, holding people to the processes and systems for which they're responsible. And ultimately, we don't want to fire people. We want to be nice. We want to help. And you have to give that help. You have to give that support. You have to give that guidance and training. You have to give people the tools they need to be successful. Otherwise, you can't expect them to be successful. But if you're giving those things, then you have to hold your teams to the fire. You have to be the not nice guy or the not nice gal sometimes. And I think people have to value their mission and their ultimate goals higher than the avoidance that they feel of wanting to have hard conversations, or do the hard things when it comes to leading people. So, I mean, not really keyed into current events, but I would
Yeah.
say it's just something I see and hear again and again and again. It's just people not doing what they know they need to do because it's hard, and then just wondering why their organization, why their team just stays the same and stays frustrating and stays non-performing over months and months and years, because they don't do the hard things that need to be done, make the hard decisions that need to be made, for the benefit of their mission, for the benefit of their customers, for the benefit of whatever they started this business or are leaders in this business for.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that. And definitely, and beyond accountability and having right, not just having standards, but it sounds like you were talking about holding people to the standard. Um, what about like talent, like finding talent, right? Like how many of us just hire, you hire people because it's an easy hire, or it's a especially entrepreneurs. A lot of entrepreneurs will just hire somebody because, oh gosh, it's my cousin needs a job, and I'll take them on, or they're going to go with the lowest price. An assistant, but I'm not willing to pay somebody $40 an hour. That's outrageous, but I'll find someone for $20 an hour, right? So how much of that happens and also impacts.
Yeah,
um,
that's so true. But there's a tendency to just like quickly hire, like not to take the time to figure out what do you actually need, what skills, what activities on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis does this person need to be doing and need to be good at. And like, if you don't ever take the time to think that through and to clearly communicate that in the job description, in the interview process, and then in the onboarding process, and then you just think that you're just going to throw somebody in or have them shadow you or shadow someone else for a while, and then just think that it's going to work out and they're just going to pick up by osmosis everything that they're supposed to do, and then the job descriptions or the ideas of the job or what it should be or what it should not be keep changing day to day, week to week. That's the ultimate reason why people are failing and the people that they hire. It's not the hiree's fault. You never clearly defined what the job is, or you define it as one thing, or you never clearly defined it and then you change it later on, and you just, you don't have any written processes, and you just throw somebody in to shadow somebody else, and all the other team members and everybody that they're shadowing are all doing things in a different way. You're just setting people up for failure. I mean, I think that the biggest thing as a leader or as a manager that we need to do is to take the time, even though it's hard and we feel a rush and we feel that urgency, but to take the time to clearly define. I have a client now. I have one coaching client where she's a business owner. She has 4 stores, but she's I'm coaching her in how to be a better, because she can't afford a COO. She can't even afford me as a fractional COO, but I'm coaching her to be a better COO of her own business, right? And one of the things is we identified a role that she had. Like, first of all, we identified what are all the roles in the business, what do they need to be, who needs to be doing what. Unless you clearly identify what all the roles in the business are, where does one role end, where does the next one begin, who's responsible for that, not just like, hey, somebody do this, but like clearly
yeah.
decide. People can't be successful if they don't know even what their keys to success are, or what what they're being held responsible for. So get clear on that. Then for the role that we realized that we need to hire first, we really went over it. I mean, like in depth, like what is that person going to be doing on a daily, weekly basis? Well, how much are they going to get paid? Research the market. Like we really got clear on that so that we can clearly communicate what the role is going to be. And then when she hires this person, we're going to make sure, okay, we're not going to be rushing and doing 5 million things. We're going to really set aside time for setting up the checklists or the time to train that person, and not just throw them in like so many of us do. I mean, in a former business I was in, we at one point did like a survey of employees, and employee satisfaction was the lowest for people in their first 6 months of employment. It was the lowest for the newest employees, where you think there'd be the most excitement, there'd be the freshest faces, but they were just in the middle of this turmoil of just like, okay, we'll do all the HR stuff at the beginning, like a couple of days, and then we'll just throw you into shadow a bunch of people that also don't have any time to spend with you because they're so busy with their own stuff, not really giving thought into onboarding, giving thought into what your job description is, clearly identifying it, describing it, giving people materials or checklists or processes, something so they know the right way to do their job. It's not all based on shadowing and oral tradition. And I'm sorry for a little bit of a
Mm.
rant there, but
No, I'm with you. I mean, that's how I learned to become a better leader, because I made all the mistakes you just
yeah,
mentioned as I was building my teams, and
right.
just
Yeah,
bringing
yeah,
people in.
we
You
did that. We
spend a
did
half
too.
day
That's why
with
we
them.
had that.
Yeah,
Sorry.
right. I mean, as I'm listening to you, you're helping me understand. Like, you could bring a fractional leader in to help them build out their right, their whole organizational chart, their system, their
Yeah.
onboarding product. Right?
As a
Is that
COO,
something?
that's what we
Yeah,
do. I mean, right,
yeah,
we look at the whole business. We come up with a
yeah.
roadmap of what needs to happen in the business. So we have real estate clients. I mean, all kinds, but like, yeah, for sure.
That actually helped me understand more, like, about what someone would do. We'd bring someone in and say, "Hey, help me build a real business here," right?
Yeah.
Like job
Hey, David.
descriptions. Yeah, yeah,
David,
yeah.
this is Eric. Sorry to budge in here. If there's a way to boost Ben's volume by about double, that would be great. It's not matching your volume, and
Oh,
it's
Oh,
difficult.
I'll
thank
try to do the mic a
thank
little
you.
closer, although we're at the end of the recording, but I'll make the mic a little
Thanks,
closer now.
thanks, Eric. I appreciate that. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna open it up to. I don't know if you guys. Is that better, Eric? By the way, speaking of, is it better now? And
Well,
Is
you
that
were
any
fine,
better with
David. It's,
the
it's Ben's volume that we need.
okay.
yeah, but I'm
Well,
saying
you
is
sound
mine
all
any
right
better
on
now
my
that I
end,
put
Ben.
the
So
but
it,
now that I put the mic closer, is that any better?
it is actually, now that he mentioned it, is probably a little bit lower, but it's good.
Well, hopefully on the
Yeah.
post production you guys can turn up my volume a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll figure that out. All right. Well, we have a few people. Does anybody have a question for Ben? Anybody on Clubhouse want to ask Ben a question? All right. Well, it doesn't look like we have any additional questions. I would just ask you, if somebody, like, let's say somebody listening says, like, to me, I'm like, yeah, this actually sounds pretty good. Like, I should be, like, I'm a consultant anyway. So people bring me in to look at their sales process, and they pay me a lot. So it's similar to what you guys are doing. They're just not hiring me. Like, I'm not an employee. I'm a consultant. Right. But somebody said, "Hey, I want to actually. This sounds like really, really good. How would somebody become a fractional leader? What would be the steps?"
Well, it's a very wide ranging question. There's one good educational organization for people going into fractional called Voyager U, VOYAGEUR, and the letter U.com. So voyageru.com. That's something to check out. Uh, Also, a lot of people who are going into fractional, even though the target market, the target audience of my book is the business owner side, but I've been told by many fractional executives that it's been extremely helpful for them in understanding what fractional is, how it works, and giving them language to explain it to other people and maybe explain it to themselves. So I've found people get a lot of value from that. And One other thing I would say is you can check out wolfsedgeintegrators.com. That's my company website /resources, wolfsedgeintegrators.com /resources. We have several resources there that people might find valuable. First and most importantly, probably is a roadmap similar to the one that we use with our own clients as COOs. So that if you want to do what a COO would be doing in your own business, but try to do it for yourself, is check out wolfsedgeintegrators.com /resources. And we've got a good roadmap and training guide on how to use it, similar to what we do with our clients, for you to hopefully be able to do that for yourself.
All right, excellent, man. Well, I like the three benefits you mentioned: fun, flexibility, and
Money.
impact.
No, money.
That's,
That's the third
huh?
one. More fun, more
Oh, the third
flexibility, and
one:
more money. That
more
was the third one.
more fun, flexibility, and money.
Yeah.
I love it. And I thought you said impact earlier, but impact might have
Well,
went
that's
with
part of fun,
one of
really.
the
I consider
others.
is the ability to make impact, I think, is part of what
Yeah.
makes it more fun.
So when you make more impact, you make more money. Is what you're saying. All right.
That's right.
All right. Good stuff, man. Well, I'm great. I'm glad you came on, and I appreciate you coming on. And anything that I should have asked that I didn't, I'm guessing there's probably a lot, but that's all. It's good. Anything that I probably should have asked.
I'm not sure. I guess I would just say, look, Fractional Leadership, Landing Executive Talent You Thought Was Out of Reach. Hopefully it's a good book. It's Audible, paperback,
Yes.
hardcover, soft cover. Audible, I mentioned Kindle. That's right. That's the one I forgot. Any format you want, it's available. So hopefully that could be a good resource.
Got it. All right. So everybody can grab a copy of your book. Again, give us your website, Ben. And
the website is Wolfs, WOLFS, wolfsedgeintegrators.com, wolfsedgeintegrators.com. If you want the resource page, it's /resources. So some good stuff there that you can use in your own business.
So ironically, before we started recording, I did look up, I Googled fractional leadership, and your website was what came up. So did you coin that? Is that you?
I did trademark the term. I could show you the trademark certificate. I actually did trademark the term fractional leadership.
Good for you, man. Well, that's super, super cool. So, well, I do appreciate you having you, man. And thanks for educating me a little bit today on something. And that said, I just want to thank you for your time.
Thank you. It was fun. I appreciate it, David.